Susan Erickson. I'm here for Sue Warburton.
Okay.
Representation.
Shivali Finkelstein, assistant principal. Okay.
Gabe Anthony, school committee student representative.
Barbara Morse, principal.
Heather Wood, ESP VP.
Bob Correcking, Director of School Facilities.
Bob Mitchell, interim assistant superintendent.
Rob Mezzanotte, assistant superintendent.
Barbara Marr, principal DMS.
Frank Pallotta, interim.
Andrew Ennis, attorney for the district.
Chloe Dyhouse, student.
And Jen, school committee member. Thank you, and I don't think we had anybody sign up for citizens' comments. Did the members of the policy subcommittee have an opportunity to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Bob, did you get a chance to look at them?
Yes.
Okay, can I get a motion, Frank made a motion, can I get a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes approved. So I know that the first policy that we have is the use of school buildings in the field, but because everybody's here to discuss the non-discrimination policy, I figured we would start with that first so that we can release everybody. So Andrew, do you want to give a little background on what this policy is?
Sure, so this policy is in draft form at this point in time. It's intended to encompass a number of different kinds of harassment and discrimination into one spot and to all follow essentially the same procedure. It encompasses not only Title IX, but it encompasses discrimination based on disability, harassment in general, and like I said, the real intent here was one of the comments that we've heard is there's all these different policies, different procedures. Each school has a different procedure. You know, depending on the violation, it triggers this kind of investigation versus that kind of investigation. So the intent of this particular policy is to put everything into one place and make it comprehensive. So if someone's feeling harassed or discriminated against, they go to this particular document, and hopefully this answers their questions or delineates sort of what they need to do or what they can expect. We do know it's lengthy, so one of the things the subcommittee had discussed at the first meeting was a table of contents, which we put together, make it a little bit easier so you can just go right to the page if you're looking. This is in compliance as it's written with all the current federal and state statutes. And so this is a big initiative of the school committee, is to get this particular document up and running. That's going to hopefully result in the modifications or even deletion of a lot of policies, so we can sort of streamline this process. And then I think I can speak for the school committee, Jen, that the hope is that once this is up and running, that we'll be doing significant training on it for students and coaches and staff and faculty and everyone at the beginning of next school year.
Yes, yes. So we wanted everybody, because this is such an all-encompassing document, it's going to touch basically everybody in the district. And one thing that is different about this document than our prior documents is that it provides protection for staff members, whereas our other policies didn't so much. We really wanted to get the input of the people who are affected by the policy. We wanted to get input on, you know, do you see concerns with it? Do you see, you know, is it practical to implement? Not so much the law, obviously, because the law is the law, but, you know, in terms of, you know, is there stuff that you believe should be added? Is there stuff that you think, you know, won't work from a practical standpoint? Is there conflicts with the union contracts? We're just really looking for, we want this to be she's probably
She
taking
made
it. You know, we want it to be a document that actually works, because policies should reflect what we're actually doing. So we really want this to be something that is, you know, even though it's 82 pages long, it's not that long, I promise, but, you know, that, you know, people can actually, that works for them. So we really like true input on what people think about the document. So I don't know if you've had a chance to review it yet, but if you hadn't, if you could take a couple minutes and just let us know questions, comments, concerns.
I just a couple of very quick things, Jen, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think you know, it's not a recommendation. I guess it's more of a question about actually, you know, applying the policy once it's approved. So, for example, on page 2, where it says applicability, scope, and notice, so,
Yep.
and it has a list of all of the groups that the policy applies to, and one of them is vendors.
Yes,
So, I guess, from an implementation standpoint, vendors, I'm assuming, are those organizations that do work in the school in some way, or with students in some way. So, you know, how does the school department ensure that vendors, for example, know that this policy exists and that they are responsible for knowing that this policy exists? I'm not suggesting that you would be able to answer that right now, but I just think from an implementation standpoint, that's something that's gonna have to be considered.
right, no, and I believe that we had added vendor, after the initial review of this, because it would be anybody who would potentially come into contact with a student or a staff member, in order to, let them know, or in this case, more to let the staff member or the student know what their protections were if they had an interaction with a vendor who put them in that position. Andrew's probably the better one to say how it would be implemented, but that definitely would be something that we would have to make part of our standard agreements with all of our vendors.
And I just, if I may, one more question, or, and there may be more, but on the next page, page 3, and that, really that first full paragraph that starts with the policy addresses all forms, that sentence that says
I'm
not.
sorry, where are you?
The first full paragraph that says the policy addresses all forms of discrimination and harassment. Do I have the same document? It's page 3.
Oh, I gotcha, okay, yep.
Okay, all right, so the second sentence, I just would recommend that you add something, and I'll explain why in a second. Notwithstanding to be adjudicated under Title IX, the alleged behavior must constitute Title IX prohibited conduct and must have occurred within the district's education program or activity in the United States. So my question is, what if there is a school-sponsored activity outside of the United States? Like, what if there is a school-sponsored activity in Canada, or there's a,
Either in
Ecuador?
Germany or.
Yeah.
So it would, so based on my experience, I would just add, activity on any school-related, in the United States, or any school-related activity outside of it.
Is it
Something
only
like that.
on stuff that's covered in the United
I
States?
think it is,
Andrew?
but
Yeah,
let me
that's why-
let me
that's
research
also
that, but
specific,
yeah, that's exactly my thought, I
Yeah.
can't imagine. But I'll definitely take a look at that.
So I might be able to get away with harassment if I'm outside of it. Is that what you're telling me, Counselor?
I'm not defending or
Look at you.
editorializing, I'm just telling you what it
Just
says.
stating what
Only
it is.
teasing.
No, but those are,
Well,
those
you
are
know
the
what
types
made
of
me
questions
think of-
that we wanna ask, yeah.
When I was an assistant superintendent, we had an incident where there was drinking on a school-sponsored trip outside of the United States. So all, all school-related policies were in effect. So anyway, that's what triggered my thinking. Anyway, thank you.
No, that's a great question.
And I think actually as I read that, and I agree, what I think this is saying, and we've seen this occur, you may not have a violation under Title IX if it's outside of the United States, but that's not to say it still isn't harassment or discrimination or bullying or something else under a different policy, or under this policy, just under a different section.
Your question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have not had the chance to look through all of this yet, but just a question I have. Does this at all change the procedure for students to report any harassment? Like, is there anything that they have to do differently, or can we just still just go to the, see something, say something, or administrator, or whatever?
It does change the procedure.
Okay.
So, and that's part of the reason why we wanna have everybody's input, because we wanna make sure that it is a workable policy in terms of reporting, because that is the most important part, really, is, how do people know where to go and who to go to when something happens? And the reporting part.
Page 12, page
Yeah.
12.
Because the see something, say something is great, but that isn't going to get it reported as a Title IX violation, and that's not going to necessarily start a report here within the school. That goes to an outside, company who is really keeping track of it more for reports of imminent, like,
I
harm.
believe it also goes to Mr. Anderson.
It goes to all of our office.
Sorry, can you say that again? It goes to where?
All three administrators receive it. The deans are not currently receiving it,
Yeah.
but the two APs and the principal all
Got it.
receive it.
And that can be anonymous, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I may have missed it. If I did, then I apologize, but, is there anywhere in the policy that speaks to the fact that, if there is a wrong decision or a lack of a follow-up, what's the liability in terms of a consequence for the person that it's reported to?
So you're talking about, like, let's say if something got reported.
And we don't follow, the policy's not followed?
Yeah, so if you tell the principal and then nothing happens.
Right.
Is that what you're saying, Frank?
Yeah, at any level that, I don't, whether it should be in there, I'm not sure, but that's probably a legal question.
Yeah, I mean, the general concept there is that as an employee, whether it's a teacher, administrator, whoever it is, you're obligated under your job description to follow school committee policy. So if, whatever policy it is, if you're found to have not followed the appropriate protocol, you could be subject to discipline.
I
We
feel
can
like-
certainly make that clear in here, but that's,
I feel like the intent that, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, that you're saying though is like, how do people know what then? So like, yes, that might be the case, right, like, but then if you had said something to someone and nothing happened, how do you know, what's the appropriate time length to then go and say something to someone else, and who do
I
you
got
say
you, I
something to
got
something
you.
else? Is that kind of where you're going, Frank?
Yeah.
so it just doesn't, I reported it to somebody and I don't know what happened to it after that, maybe nothing. Is that the?
So I don't know, I don't remember if that's in there or not. but
There
we can-
was something
There
about
was
time.
something.
There
Yes,
was a
there
res-
was, yeah.
Reasonable, I think, wasn't it, Jen?
Yeah, but that was our
We had this
reasonable
back and forth,
conversation,
right?
yes.
Yeah, it was a reasonable amount too.
Yeah, because it was.
Upon receiving a report, if the coordinator is made aware of the identity of the complainant, the coordinator or designee will make all reasonable effort to promptly contact the complainant to, is that all reasonable, efforts to promptly?
And then there was a, I remember, there was like hours or days or something.
Is there a gauge in that?
I see a lot of things just saying promptly and
Yeah.
reasonable.
There's the 24-hour window with
The DCYF.
DCYF.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's what you're remembering or not, but I don't remember seeing a time, a specific time with any other of the reporting.
That's definitely been what my concern has been as well. I'm just scrolling through it and I've been highlighting every time I see the word prompt. Because as a student, you know, I don't know that knowing that something will happen promptly, you know, I feel like it would be really helpful to have a time frame, like you guys were saying. That's been one of my main concerns.
I'm not laughing at you, Chloe, I'm laughing at Andrew, because
Yeah.
he's cringing when you said that.
Hey,
'cause he and
I mean, the lawyer part of me, obviously, I use the term promptly because it doesn't tie the district to a specific timeline. And a concern from my point of view, liability-wise, is if we say 24 hours and it happens on a Friday at 3:30, and then what happens over the weekend, or what happens if it's reported, just, I understand the concern, and that's why Jen and I are kind of laughing, because I think she at one point knew exactly how many times I said promptly in here.
Can there be something in the middle, Andrew, where it's not as prompt, like what is the definition of prompt?
Well, that's-
Cause I understand all of that, but also like in other documents in the world, like there's, like, you know, it's within 72 business hours,
Yeah, I think we talked about
within,
something like no later than X amount
like
of
within
hours
one
after.
school week.
I mean,
or-
that's up to you folks, that's
Yeah,
up
so-
to you as a
yeah.
body, like I said, that my concern.
What does prompt mean to the people in the room? Like when I say prompt, what do you think that means? Just, and there's no right or wrong answer, but like what does prompt mean?
As soon as possible.
So that
It's not what it means in my
to me.
world. That's okay, no? Like ASAP, like that day?
Just as soon as possible. That
Okay.
might mean a million things.
I think it could mean whatever the administrator who's tasked with the problem views as prompt, which I think could be as a student, is kind of scary, because like, you know what I mean, like,
It can take time to investigate and talk to everybody, and that's part of it, is that it's not just a quick decision. You have to interview, you have to investigate, and so as quickly as you can do all those things the right way.
I think the question at hand for what the language you were questioning was, how promptly do you try to contact the complainant? Like, if you're the complainant, how promptly should you
That's
expect to hear?
ASAP to
That's
me, I
ASAP.
think what he said is spot on, I mean, and I guess it might depend somewhat on the nature of what's reported. If something's imminent, if something's happening, if someone says this happened 6 months ago, I mean, that may make a difference in someone's mind, but promptly to me still means I've gotten this piece of information. I don't go home for the weekend and, you know, enjoy myself over the summer and bring it back. It means, okay, I've got this information, let's get it to the person, let's get it to the coordinator, where it needs to get to.
So the Oxford Dictionary definition of promptly is with little or no delay or immediately.
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but like, I think it's used differently in different things, like in that sentence, the one that Barbara just said, like, it is, like, promptly to me means like literally as soon as physically possible. You know, whether it's 4 PM on Friday or Sunday morning, like, I'm gonna get back to you as soon as possible, like, literally as soon as I possibly can. Whereas I think in other parts of the document, it says promptly, and in my mind, the definition is like within, like, we'll do the investigation in like, it could take weeks, right? And so maybe some differentiation and making sure that whenever we use promptly, it means with little or no delay or immediately. And then making sure that we're not accidentally using that in a situation where it would not mean immediate or that sort of thing. So maybe we can look through and just double check that.
Yeah, because that first promptly is definitely, like, when you get that complaint, promptly means now.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the actual investigation, promptly is as quickly as you can reasonably be expected to work through it.
And the school department would assume liability even for volunteers, if the school department approves the volunteers to participate in a school activity.
I believe that we expanded the scope of this to include volunteers, yes.
And a large portion of this is going to be, there's a lot of legalese in here, but a large portion of it is going to be that professional development for everybody, volunteers included into, if A, then B, sort of thing. This is what needs to happen, and this is how it has to happen, and to whom it goes to.
If that's something for students to be doing as well, how can we trust them to actually pay attention? And at what levels of students are we doing this? Because if you asked, say, an elementary school student to do this, I don't think they'd understand a lot of the language. I mean, to them, if somebody pushed them, they're just gonna go to the principal and say, I don't know, Dr. Morse pushed me or whatever. Like, I don't think they're gonna follow a policy.
Yeah, no, but again, I think then it's up to the adult to take that information and to make at least that threshold decision. Is this something that could trigger disability-based harassment, sexually-based harassment, something like that? If so, I need to promptly get this to the coordinator. If it's two students on the playground who are friends and one tripped over the other one, it makes it, there has to be some discretion amongst that adult who takes the complaint, because you're right. But I think that again is going to be part of the bigger picture, which is going to be the training of people and what constitutes harassment and what doesn't, and that sort of thing. That's really where I think the meat of this comes in.
I think there also needs to be discretion at the elementary level of that they're children and that we're teaching them. And I'm talking like K-2, like, they don't know some of these things, that you do need to teach the skill. And it's not, you don't want some of these things on a child's permanent record if it's something that you can teach, because they're babies. That's our whole job, is to teach social skills, academics. So we do need to be cognizant of what age group we're holding to this standard sometimes too.
Does the law designate age? Because I don't think it does.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and I agree with you. I can tell you, if I did not in this district, I have bullying complaints filed against 3-year-olds.
Right.
And I don't get that, but I don't know,
But when a parent complains that a child's being bullied by another kindergartner, and you find out that the comments being made is saying, your mom's fat or you're stupid, that's, we need to talk about that. We need to help them build social skills and how to have relations and not take things to a level that doesn't need to be taken to. I guess that's mine.
I understood. You mind if I just?
No. Yeah.
So sort of what my experience, or if you were calling me and asking me the question, what I would probably say there is, you know, it's your decision to make, I definitely don't disagree with you, but you've gotta document that. You just, gone are the days of, that's not bullying, go back to your classroom, we're done. You've got, you know, even if it's a one-page document that says, yep, this was reported as bullying, we went in, here, we talked to a couple of kiddos, this is what we found out, we've determined it's not bullying because they're young and this, we intend to use this as a teachable moment and nothing more. That, I'm happy with that all day long, it's just, the problem, and I know that time is an issue and everything else, but the problem is just, you know, sort of just, oh, don't worry about it, go this direction, and then if it's documented and that's the conclusion, that's fine all day long.
Yeah, I mean, the intent of creating this policy isn't to put like second graders in like second grade jail. Like, it's not, like, it's to protect the students, it's protect you all, and it's to, you know, define the parameters of, you know, what is harassment, what is bullying, and most importantly, like Andrew said, it's to define these things so that then everybody can be trained on it, like, so that it's second nature, because we're hearing a lot of, well, we don't know what is, we don't know what isn't, and we don't know who to go to, and that's really what we want to try and make happen out of this, is to streamline it so that you don't have to go to a 22-page document and go to, like, is it, you know, page 19 section A, so that it becomes second-hand nature, that if something happens, you just, you know, because the training has happened. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that the policy reflects what happens. So, you know, we want this to be a document that, while it reflects the law, it reflects what will serve the district. And that's where we're really looking for input. And nobody knows better what works than the people who are in the building. So,
I just have a policy question in general. Not specific to this is critically important, of course. But there are policies that all staff, and probably all students, but let's just talk about all staff, both certified and non-certified staff, there are policies that everyone needs to know. Is there a process in North Kingstown for all staff to know those essential policies on a yearly basis? I don't expect you to answer that question. So, I mean, so is there, for example, you know, I've worked in a couple of districts where, and I don't know, Rob, what your experience with this is, but I've worked in a couple of districts where all staff, both certified and non-certified staff, are required to read, there is a list of all policies that everyone in the district is required to read, and there's a Google document that everyone signs off on, you know, which essentially they are, you know, admitting that they have taken the time to read these essential policies, and it really does protect the district, is what it does. So I'm just curious if there is anything like that in place, and I'm not assuming that there isn't, but if there isn't, then it seems to me that is something that should be in place, right? So there are policies that people need to know to protect the individual, to protect the system.
We have something similar, maybe, I'm not sure if it's about the policies, but we do on opening orientation day, I'm trying to pull up my agenda right now. They sign off on DCYF, they sign off on bloodborne pathogens, they sign off on something else.
So
too.
we did Title IX, sexual assault.
And the NK
Mandatory
district
reporting.
book as well,
Dating violence.
Dating
yes,
violence.
so they sign off on all of that, and it goes to HR, and he's able to, or Brian used to keep track of it that way.
But it's pretty limited, that's about the list.
Right,
Yeah, I'm
that's
just
it.
curious, because, I mean, people have until the end of September.
Yeah, ours is
to read
October
it all.
15th at my work.
Okay, so I just think that is a practice that should be considered, you know, because then you have documentation to essentially protect the individual and/or.
Yeah, and I think right now we're at the let's make policies that are actually useful and helpful stage, at least with this one. And the purpose of this overarching policy is there's a lot of this stuff that's actually in other policies in other places, and the recommendation from the consultant was to consolidate it. And then we really, you know, with Jen chairing the committee and then me chairing the school committee, like, we really wanted to actually talk to the folks that would be implementing the policy, working with the policy, having students have feedback in it, so that we could try to get a very tight document that people like said, yes, this is good, and then thinking about the implementation and the training on it, and making sure that folks feel comfortable knowing it, and also advertising it. So this is a long doc, but in my brain, it's on a website where there's different links that bring you to different sections and are very clear, and so making sure that it's digestible as well, even though it's all in one spot. So we're kind of in that development piece, and then as we work through the other policies, figuring out which ones are essential and working with the administration on like how we wanna mandate like reading and compliance of that and how we roll out new ones too. So it's a really valuable point about the training and like signing off, if you will.
In mentioning the consolidation of things that are in handbooks, the one thing that happened this year is we had cases of bullying where people weren't in protected classes. So I think it needs to keep the language in the handbooks that make sure that there's no bullying that's being allowed, because this specifically mentions, protected class, protected classes. But we need to have that language where it doesn't matter if you're protected class or not, it's not
What,
happening.
and Jen and I have actually talked about this, what other districts have done, what we envision doing here is you've obviously gotta have the Rhode Island State bullying policy anyway. And so you have that in place, and then there'll be language in there that says, if the bullying, impacts a protected class, but whatever it is, go to see this policy, but if not, you're going to pursue, go under the actual bullying policy itself. And there'll be a couple of those, I think, that Jen had identified that we talked a little bit about.
The policy's a good policy. I think the challenge is what constitutes harassment and bullying, and the consistency of the implementation of that and follow-up. What may be done in one school may not be done in another school, and it's the same situation. Even in athletics, I've had situations cross my desk where parents felt that their child was bullied because they were sick and they had to run 2 laps. The parent felt that student was being bullied and harassed into running 2 laps. So it comes down to a real delineation of the situation and somebody having the insight to kind of figure that out and sort it out. And that's a challenge. I think that's a challenge in any policy. But the key is to try to be consistent with all of it. And, this policy at least gives you some direction, gives you the definitions that you can refer to. It may not include all the definitions, but it does give you a lot of guidance, but you will continually be challenged with the interpretation of what constitutes bullying and harassment.
So that's kind of like, just to piggyback on that real quick, Frank, because I think this is a great policy. The language here I think really makes sense, especially the piece about everything being consolidated. Where my mind goes when I'm hearing and listening to this is just like where we are now at the different levels in terms of how well this is understood by our students and by our staff. So where, so what gap are we trying to close here is kind of where my mind goes. And I think that, to Frank's point, the communication is going to be different depending on the age of the student. The way we message that needs to be different, okay, depending on the age of the student. But I think that's where I go to is where are we now with the level of understanding? And we have 2 students here, so I may put you on the spot, I apologize, but where are we now with the understanding at the student level of what the process is if you're bullied or harassed? Is there an understanding?
To me, in both elementary, middle school, and high school, basically just tell a teacher or tell an administrator, just tell an adult, and then the adults will handle it. And now at the high school, and maybe even since I've been in middle school, we've had the option, as I mentioned earlier, of the see something, say something.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the process.
Okay.
I've been aware that there's a link, I think this is see something, say something, like you said. I don't know that it is widely used, but I think students know about it, and then.
We have the training yearly, and I heard we didn't do it, I was just talking, I think it was Mr. Anderson a few days ago, and we didn't do it yet this year because of, we weren't sure if it was gonna be renewed, but it has been renewed now, so we might roll out the training later this year or next year, soon, because it has been renewed.
I think it needs to be done, even with high school students though, I think it's not one of those things like with the adults, you do it at the beginning of the year and then it's done. I think it needs to be systematically reinforced,
Yeah.
especially with the freshman and sophomore levels until, by the time you're junior, if you've heard it several times a year for a couple of years, you know what the process is.
But just speaking of where we are right now, I think it's
Right.
student knows something, student tells teacher or administrator, or uses cease and desist.
Yeah, cause I think like at the, like where I see this coming to really the ahead is taking this, okay, and making it operational, right? Like making it clear and operational at the different levels, so that it's understood by all in a very, you know, in a way that's understandable to a wide audience.
Because I heard those safe-based students heartbreakingly say last night that if somebody was sexually assaulted, they didn't know where to go.
I agree, that was very disturbing.
Right, and so that's a problem.
So I Googled the difference between bullying and harassment. 60-second answer is what we're going with here. And this is from the National Bullying Prevention Center, so whatever that's worth. It says the difference between bullying and harassment is when a bullying behavior is directed at or targeted, is also connected to a protected class, and that behavior is defined as harassment. So it seems like the protected class has something to do, like it could be one, but it could be both, depending on if it involves a protected class.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if it pertains to a protected class, you shift into this thing, whereas if it's just bullying, you know, one student keeps pushing the other student down, let's say over a course of a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and it's not for any reason other than they wanna push the other student down, that may very well constitute bullying. That has nothing to do with the protected class, it's nothing to do with, you know, harassment in the federal definition sense.
What's the difference between bullying and just being mean?
So.
No, like, I think
yeah.
there's a difference, like, I feel
There's a
like for me,
difference.
bullying is intentional,
What?
like repeated,
And
power
malicious.
dynamic, yeah, like,
Ongoing and malicious.
yeah, versus like, sometimes my kid probably says mean stuff to another kid, but maybe they're not bullying.
The
And that's-
repeated seems to, the repeated or the frequency of the behavior
Yeah.
is definitely something that everyone takes into consideration. Because anyone can have a bad day, say something they maybe regret saying, or say something mean. But when you repeatedly, you know, over a period of time, continue to target a particular student or adult or whoever it is with those kind of comments, now you're getting into a different realm.
But, go ahead.
That's when I actually complete like this document. I have a spreadsheet for myself, so if a parent or a child uses the word bullying, I actually will put it into this document and investigate it. A lot of times it doesn't end up in the bullying form because it's not bullying. But I don't discount that someone said it, and I don't not call people and follow up on it. So if the word's used, it triggers me to have to respond, and I put it here to make sure that I do some kind of follow-up on it that's appropriate. Oftentimes in elementary, it's not bullying yet, it's the earlier stage of it, but it still is something that was enough to them to make it matter. And I document it so that way, when someone says, oh, I told Principal Laughlin, I can say, yeah, they did, and here's the investigation, and here's the findings, so.
But, and that's, I love that you do that, but that goes to the point that Frank just brought up, is like, we get that bullying report every 6 months, the school committee does, and it's left to discretion. Because what is bullying to one person isn't bullying to another, and I refuse to believe that there are X amount of incidents in one school and 0 amount of incidents in another. Like, it's just not physically possible, that the kids in this school are amazing and the kids in the school are horrible. So that is, we need to find a way for consistency, like in some rubric where regardless of what it is, like it's being documented. Because otherwise it's left to discretion, and like the system is fabulous, like I think that's great, and there should be some type of system so that it's not left to the discretion of, you know, what is bullying in one school should be bullying in another. It needs to be consistent across the board.
Is the report based on things that are investigated and determined to be bullying, or things that are reported as bullying?
It is based on things that are investigated and determined to be bullying, but it's at the discretion of each individual building administrator what they investigate as a bullying incident, because it's based on the criteria by the statute, which is, you know, that statewide bullying statute. So it's kind of what Erin just went to, like what's bullying versus what's being mean. It's,
Yeah, I would, one of the things that I've been challenged with as a superintendent over the years has been when one student threatens or harasses another student through an email over the weekend, and the student comes in and reports it to the administration, you know, there's always that fine line in terms of what would be our responsibility at that point. And I always have looked at it, I just take individual cases, and try to deal with it. But I definitely address it by talking to both students, particularly if there's a pattern of that type of activity. But then I always question the liability part, when the school district gets involved in something like that happened over the weekend from student to student, and we do get involved and there's something that comes of that, we become responsible for that. And are we responsible, is the question.
I mean, the general concept there is if it injects itself into the school environment. So if it's just between two students outside of school, unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, typically not. But if maybe now one student won't come to school anymore because of what occurred over the weekend, or if, God forbid it's a picture or something like that, and now the teachers are all reporting, hey, everyone's got this picture of Andrew, and then now everything's being disrupted in the educational environment, now it becomes our issue. And that's not always a bright line either, but that's sort of the rule of thumb.
Did you have something there?
Yeah, I just wanted, when we were talking about the harassment versus bullying thing, I had pulled up the harassment section, and I don't mean to bring this up again, but I noticed that a concern I have with some of the wording, it's on page 10 of the document and page 8. I put it into a Google Doc. I was just wondering, and this is about like what's considered as harassment, so sort of relevant, but it says under B, hostile environment, sexual harassment, that it means any unwelcome sexual advance, request for sexual favors, or any other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, when the advance, request, or conduct has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's learning or work performance. I guess I'm just a little concerned about the use of unreasonable there, just because, like, is there a type of verbal or physical conduct or sexual harassment that's reasonable? I mean, I don't mean to be like a nitpicky,
No, that's a good point.
but I happened to glance at it, and I was like, I don't know how
I mean, that's the federal definition, but
Oh, it is the federal
your point's well taken.
definition?
No, I
Okay.
think, to be honest with you, as you're saying it, I knew exactly where you were going, but I don't, I mean, that really, I wasn't nearly
So-
clever enough to write all
so
this stuff
maybe-
up, this is all.
No, but so that brings up a good point, though. There are certain things in this document that the district wrote, and there are certain things in this document that the district didn't write. And so I think if we're using a definition that has been taken from the state or the federal government, like, we should reference said, like that, so at least people understand where that language came from, because if we're not able to create our own hostile environment, sexual harassment definition, we should at least be referencing where it's coming from, to your point, so that you don't
Yeah,
think, gee, why
sorry,
they do
I
that?
just didn't realize that it was
Yeah.
from the.
No, it's okay.
federal government.
And then the state does have, definitions of bullying and different things, so the same thing I think is important, in this policy, defining what the state defines as bullying, what the state defines as harassment, or whoever's the most legal authority, because I do think having definitions in there will help people understand the difference between just kids being mean to each other, bullying, and then harassment, which are 3 different levels in my mind.
I have a question. So, I think this is maybe more for Mr. Peñas. Even though this is, we're using the language from the government's language, can we agree that, like, who wouldn't agree that removing the word unreasonably is, I mean, can we do that? Can we just
The
remove
general
the
concept
word?
there is you can always do more, you can't do less.
So no.
No, you could say, has the purpose or effect of interfering with an individual's learning or work performance.
Just eliminating the word, I mean, and it gets at, like, then you're in a position where you gotta make a judgment about whether it's reasonable or unreasonable.
Oh, we can look into that.
Yeah, let me just double check that.
I wouldn't wanna be in that position.
And that's the biggest thing for me, is making sure that this is training is really important, but administrative buy-in is the first step of that, right? Because if you all are held responsible for implementing this policy and training people on this policy and explaining this policy to your staff, like, you have to buy the policy. And if you're like, I don't like this part, or I don't, whatever, like, that's why, like, this is really important, because like, if you feel good about the policy, even though it's not something to, like, that the policy's tight, then it will help us with the stuff that you were talking about rolling it out and being able to implement it and being able to actually do it on a Tuesday when 2 students are on the playground doing X, Y, Z and understanding, oh, this is this, and this has to go this path because of this. Pam, I think, Jen?
Oh, sorry, Pam. Sorry, just a comment and take it for what it's worth. I think this is a really impressive group that's at the table. I was wondering why maybe a parent who isn't in the school system isn't part of the table.
Just for this first read, we wanted to have it.
Are they gonna be involved
We
in
can
maybe
certainly
a
have
second?
a
I just
parent. Yeah, no, I think that's a
suggested,
great
because
suggestion,
I
yeah.
think to get buy-in, you need the parents too, and not parents, I
That are
respect you
parents in
all,
the
but
system,
that
yeah.
are in the system.
No, I think that's a great idea.
And it's really good conversation, and I think if you had a few parents, maybe volunteers, because volunteers seem to be in the policy as well, they might have a different perspective as a volunteer or something like that, maybe some PTO members, because if you got buy-in from that, it would probably help.
No, that's a great idea, thank you.
Yeah, that was our intent, we wanted to start with the staff first, because if they said something, like, why make
Yeah,
volunteers read stuff
I
that
get
could
that, I
change,
just
but yeah,
wanted to make sure that maybe
Yeah.
the next meeting or
Yes.
whatever.
absolutely.
Thanks.
If I may real quick, and I wanna go back to Andrew's point and also Aaron's point recently about, Andrew's point being about the piece of if it happens outside of school hours and how that would then necessarily or potentially impact in-school types of things, and also Aaron's point about the buy-in piece. I think that is, if I can, administrators can weigh in, but I think that's a significant part of the job right now, is because of the prevalence of social media that we have among our students, the amount of things that are said outside of school hours or communicated through different means frequently find their way in front of an administrator, that didn't happen during the school day. So I just wanna point it out, I don't know if I have an answer to this, okay, I just wanna be clear about that, but I wanna point out that determination is very challenging.
Yeah, I agree.
Very challenging, because again, when you're talking about things that kind of pass between 2 students on a social media platform on a weekend or at night, chances are, if it's being brought to you as the administrator, the person bringing it to you thinks it's gonna impact the school. And that's a door that if you open, it becomes an enormously difficult thing to keep up with. I just wanna throw that out there.
A few things are guaranteed, but I'll tell you right now, you can guarantee it's gonna impact school. It impacts. If there's social media going on over the weekend or 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, it follows them in the school every day.
Agree, but for school personnel to now have to be not held responsible, but have to be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
investigate.
if they have to be investigating things that happen through social media platforms between teenagers at all hours of every day, that is, I'm telling you right now, that's impossible.
And I guess one of the delineations for me, and Andrew, I'd want your thoughts on this is, so say 2 students are going back and forth on social media, both students in the district are going back and forth, and they come into school on Monday morning and they say to my chemistry teacher, oh, this thing happened to me, and in the teacher's head, they think, oh, that is harassment, like, that isn't even bullying, that's straight up harassment. Like, the building administrators wouldn't be investigating that goes right to the Title IX coordinator, right? And they would work with local authorities, like, what would the process be for things that are at that level, like harassment level?
Well, if it's falling under this, it's going to go to a coordinator, whether that's just the Title IX coordinator,
Yeah.
we've talked about a building level coordinator, it's going to go to someone who's going to flush out then, is this a Title IX violation, is it,
Yeah.
another, protected class violation, or is it just bullying, or something like that?
Yeah, but to this point, like, it didn't it involves the students, it's being brought into the building, it's not, maybe it's only affecting their, like, personality that day. Like, so you hear about that, you're the middle school principal, you tell the Title IX coordinator, like, does the Title IX coordinator then tell like, what would the process be, and how do we make that clear to folks about the things that happen outside the building? Because I think your point is super valid, but that still could happen and have, like, onus under this policy.
And does happen, obviously, and if you look at Title IX on school grounds and that sort of thing, so again, that sort, it's an awfully difficult task, I agree completely, and I always err to the side, quite frankly, I want to see more of a substantial disruption, and I know because maybe a friend of mine, we're texting last night, and he said something that really hurt my feelings, and I'm not having a great day at school now, and I'm upset about it, and I say something to a teacher. as much as I feel for me, I'm not so sure that substantially disrupts because if that's the case, you guys each school can hire 5 full-time investigators, and that's really not our job, or what our resources should be expended on, is dealing with that kind of stuff. I'm talking more about the disruption of the educational environment, and I use the example only because it's real, and I hate to use it, but there's a picture out there or something, and all the kids are leaving class and going to the bathroom and looking at the picture, or everybody, you know what I mean? 5 teachers have now come into Barbara's office and been like, hey, I grabbed 4 kids' phones today, they're all looking at this picture, everybody's talking, this is a disaster. Now it's something that you guys have to deal with.
Could we define I know we can't, no, I'm serious.
Definitely.
No, but like,
It's really hard, and I think that's one case, and then also when we get text messages between 2 students where there's threats, and a student then is afraid to come to school, that's impacting, I feel, the school. But when it's just between 2 students, I mean, the parents need to be responsible for their children's phones, call the police, call the other family. You can handle those kinds of things, I think, outside of the school, but if we were to investigate everybody's communications, we would not do anything else but that. And I don't know that that's where you hired us, yeah.
so I think just making sure that the policy's written to be clear on that. And then also make sure when we're doing the trainings, to be able to train the differential between that.
It's gonna be all
Yeah,
about training.
but I
It
do
really,
think-
really is.
I do think though, that there has to be very clear language, and I'll reread it like through this lens of, if you, like, cause the mandatory reporter piece always comes back to me, like, if you hear about harassment, especially like Title IX harassment or something like that, like, you have a responsibility to report it, even if you ignored the other 17 things that happened that were text messages between students. Like, when that crosses that harassment line, that's where, like, I would be very concerned and wanna make sure that we have clear language in here about that, and then people understand that difference.
Yeah, and as Stephanie can tell you, that's why there's also specifically written into the regulations, that you sort of think, you may get into Title IX, but then you're right back out of Title IX. So if those buzzwords come to Stephanie, she may look at it and go, okay, yes, but this didn't happen anywhere near school. It involves an allegation against an employee who's no longer employed here, there are certain sort of
Yeah.
disqualifiers, if you will, that you say, unfortunately, based on this set of circumstances, we're not going to investigate this under Title IX because of.
For things that are not for administrators to investigate, can something be put in the policy directing students and their families to who they should go to, or if it's not something that the school, so there's no issue, they're not burdening the school, but they can still get a resolution?
Maybe not in the policy, but on, maybe on a
On the
website,
website.
like external resources, I've seen things like that, or I've seen attached resources to policies, where like the last page has national resources and different things like that, so that's a note.
I think again, my vision, I think, is the same as yours. Ultimately, there's a link on your website that someone can go to, and it's all there. It's all there, whether it's national resources, whether it's local resources, whether it's bullying, whether it's harassment, whether it's Title IX. It's there, and you can, almost like a menu, this is what I think happened, let me click on it. Okay, let me learn a little bit more about it, this is where I need to go.
And
Or
we can
geez,
provide local-
maybe I need to access this resource. I think that's sort of the concept.
I think that would be really helpful, but our procedure is, even if it's not something that we would investigate, if it's off school, over the weekend kind of thing, and it doesn't rise to the level of a police matter, with, the types of, depending on what's in the pictures they're looking at or whatever, we always call the parent and say, this is something we're aware of, it's not something we can investigate, but here are resources that we can provide to you. It's easier to have a one-pager that you can send to them, rather than, like, copy down this phone number or call this person, and,
Or even like to have it on the website, because people sometimes,
Yeah.
I don't like to talk to people, like put it on the website, that way you don't have to make them feel loud, because it's true. Put it on the website, that way people don't have to call, you know what I mean? Like if it's not involving an actual complaint or something.
I think something that you brought up earlier too, Jen, when you talked about when people submit their bullying summary report and what's actually been found as bullying, I think that's a conversation too, especially at the elementary level, of what is continuous and pervasive, in the sense that if they tell us for the first time, I go to restorative practice trainings, and every time I get a write-up, whether it be a minor or a major, I actually respond to it. And I coach the kids through it, I bring the kids together, and I do like a restorative circle. Because sometimes it might have been a couple times that they've had it happen, but it's a disagreement. And it's making sure that we're all on the same page as to what is bullying at the elementary level? Because we also have to be cognizant that our job is to, when they get to middle and high school, they know how to resolve it and have conversations so it doesn't get to bullying and harassment. And so I guess that's the part that I just wanna make sure we're on that same page with, because when you get a report and Fishing Cove doesn't have a lot, it doesn't mean that I haven't done a lot. It just means that it hasn't been identified that level.
Right.
And making sure we're clear on that together, I guess.
No, I think that's such a good point.
Mhm.
And so we will
Yeah.
make sure that we can try to define that, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is like the law.
Right.
I'm still struggling with the reason. Like,
Yeah,
I've looked at it, I've tried to, I've read it like 4 times trying to find a way that makes sense, and I haven't come up with it, but
I bet if we do, we're not the first person to ask that question, but we can find out.
it's really going to be, it's gonna be about training. It's gonna be about information to everybody, to know what you're looking for, what constitutes harassment, what, you know, what the process is to do it, make sure that the kids and adults know where to go. Because that's the first line of defense, and that's, you know, that's where school departments drop the ball. You know, someone, just because you may not think, and I tell all my clients that bullying is a term of art, and when that word is used, whether you are saying in the back of your head, there's no way this is bullying, once the word is used, it should trigger the next response, which is, okay, I at least have to follow a process here. I may absolutely come to the conclusion, that was my initial reaction, that this isn't bullying, it never could have been bullying, but you've got to somehow get from A to B, and you can't just let it go.
I had a parent that used the word bullying in a written document to me. But she still wrote it. So then I legally felt that I needed to respond in writing to her, and she was upset that I responded in writing. And I was like, but you put the word bullying, and I can't say, no big deal. Like, it's a big deal, you use a word.
It's a double-edged sword, it is, and we get this complaint a lot, and not just here, everywhere, even from parents. Well, I didn't realize this was going to turn into a full-blown investigation, I just wanted someone to know, and you have to have that uncomfortable conversation sometimes, which is like, I understand that, but we have obligations that these words mean something to us, and we have to go through a certain process, it's just the way it is.
So what I'd like to ask, because I know this is a big policy for people to digest, unless somebody has anything else that they'd like to add today, I'd like to ask that everybody review this at their leisure, and just, if there's any feedback, I'd like to set another meeting date and have people provide feedback on anything that they would like to change, whether they think, and if you have no edits, that's fine too, but we'd like to have a second, or I think this will be the 4th read on this, in this committee. We will invite parents to this, probably maybe to the next one, I'm not sure, we'll figure that out. But, our goal is to have this resolved before the end of this school year, so that we can be ready to go with it, for
We'd
the
like to do the training at the.
Yeah,
the-
at the convocation, have everything, ready to go for September.
No, we want you to feel really confident, and, I think the timing's important to make sure that, like, with a new school year, understanding a new policy. And then, there's something else I was gonna add. They can send you feedback too as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah, you can send me feedback, and if there is anybody that you think is not in the room that should have been in the room, please let me know. If there's somebody that you think is missing from a representation, point of view, please let me know so that, we can reach out to them.
I know we do have 2 students here, but maybe some of the students who did the Safe Day presentations, since they do have expertise.
That's a great idea.
With the
Yep.
sexual assault and sexual harassment aspect of this.
That's a great idea.
And one more thing, with the training, when to use, when to say sexual harassment versus bullying versus harassment, would all of the definitions of that and when to use those be part of the training so people know?
I certainly hope so.
I would, yeah, and again, I think that depends on the level and the age group of the student and sort of thing, but that's really one of the purposes of the training, is to sort of get everybody on the same page, as to, and I'll put this a little bit more on the shoulders of the adults. I mean, I think that when a kid of any age comes to you and says, this is what I've experienced, then that person needs to be thinking, okay, this is harassment, this is just bad behavior, this is something, and make sure it gets to the right place. But yeah, I think that's helpful. The term bullying gets used an awful lot, and bullying happens for sure. But my experience hearing from, especially elementary administrators, is it's used a ton, and it may not be reflective of what, the definition of bullying really is, but.
But it also could be, you know, if
Yeah,
you're looking at the
100%.
definition, a fifth grader repeatedly harassing a first grader
Oh, yeah.
about something is bullying. So, you know, so I think to your point, Gabe, the definition is super important, and then I really liked what you said, Dr. Morris, about, like, it can't just be a one-off. Like, I've seen really cool things where there's stickers in the bathrooms, where there's language in different places, where they're on the digital boards, like helping students understand the differentials, understanding the definitions, and then understanding their rights, and at the age appropriate level. Cause I know when my second grader comes home and says, oh, bullying, like, it's probably not, but that's the only word he has for, like, hey, that kid at school was being mean to this other kid, like, that's what it means to him. And so kind of, I think that piece, defining it and then educating people is huge, and that repetitiveness. And then it actually hopefully will decrease the use of it, but also make people know when it is happening, this is what you do.
Well, that's the other thing too, I think even if a student can't name it, they know that something is wrong, like to report it, like it's up to the adult to be able to name, put it in its category, like.
And you should also bear in mind, just because something might not rise to the level of a Title IX violation or a bullying
It's still a
violation,
problem.
doesn't mean it's right or it's okay. I
Right.
mean, that's the other thing too. It's not like, you know, you did something awful, but you didn't do it repeatedly, so you're not guilty
you're
of
mean to
bullying,
somebody
go
that's
home
not
and
in your
sin
class,
no
it's
more.
still-
It's not like that at all. I mean, you always have to look at it through that lens of, okay, just, may not be bullying, but if it requires some reinforcement of some kind, it requires some kind of discipline, whatever it is, that's still on the table. That's still absolutely on the table.
And that this policy provides for that, like
Yep.
if it doesn't fall into Title IX, it'll, you know.
Exactly,
it'll dump
yep.
in under.
It could just end up being a violation of the handbook, and
Yeah.
it wasn't bullying, it wasn't Title IX, it wasn't anything else, but it just wasn't the right thing to do, so here's how we'll address it.
I just think that everybody thinks Title IX right now, if something's wrong, they think Title IX, and obviously there's all these other policies and things that we can follow through on, or a principal can address an issue, but I think people only, from what I've seen so far, they want everything to be Title IX, they think that that's gonna get them a solution.
And there's like solutions that aren't through this policy, but safety plans. And some of those safety plans are for a child that doesn't have an IEP, but if a child has an IEP, then now it's a confidential document. We can share the part where your child's being protected, but I can't share the rest of the piece with you. And so, even though it may not end up in the final document of bullying, there is areas of protecting other children when there's a situation happening that's not documented, but it's important to know that it happens and we're doing it.
And I think it's important that if something's happening at the school, they tell the principal.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're bypassing that sometimes, and they're coming right to human resources. I'm not in the school, I mean, I can call the principal, I think, but they need to tell their teacher or the principal or.
Yeah, we've been thinking about, for lack of a better word, making it very visible on a website for lots of things to chain of command, because of anything, something very benign, like, hey, the sidewalk needs to be fixed, I think, especially as the school committee chair, I get everything from the sidewalks broken to other things, you know, and everything in between, and so I think that's a good point. But also, I think, letting people know when they can't go to, like, if they don't feel safe going to, like, if they're an employee and they don't feel safe going to their principal, having them understand that they can go to an extra person. Like, I think it's both, like, understanding the chain, but then also understanding, like, hey, if the chain is the unsafe place or the person that's doing X, Y, Z, then knowing how to escalate it beyond that.
Yeah.
So I think both points are, like, both are valid.
So anybody who doesn't wanna stick around for the professional conduct policy can feel free to leave, but.
Are there specific people that you wanted
Barbara
to
can't
include?
leave, sorry, Barbara.
And my students.
And your students. But anybody else who's not on the policy subcommittee, can feel free to leave. If not, you're welcome to stay for that, discussion. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time. I know everybody is very busy, but I think this is an important policy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to, without the information,
Oh, Frank has the information.
Frank did not send the information to me.
Okay. I sent it to him and Jules. All the information that was put together by the cafeteria
Okay.
for the building, for the facilities use.
At 6:30, I'm headed to the town council.
I-
meeting, so-
Oh, geez.
We spent 4 days putting it all together.
If you don't
I
want to
sent it
stay,
to Frank
it's
and
fine.
Jules and to Elle.
Made to me, I'm sorry.
No worries, right. Do you have it?
It's, one of the documents is 900 lines.
I'm very
Of
excited to
data.
read it.
Yeah, me too.
So-
Okay.
So wait,
I'll share the drive with you guys.
the good news is we're meeting so this was the, oh, it's not on this agenda.
It is, and there are
Oh.
4 policies on this agenda, so I will, I'll.
Maybe we could talk about it,
At the next meeting.
or if you wanna, like, if we wanna talk about it and then we'll read it and then look at it next time, like, if, well, since they're here, if we wanna talk about it at all?
Yeah, do you have anything you wanna share?
No, Frank asked me to be here
Yes,
in
yeah,
case you
yes.
guys needed me, so,
And there's a lot going on, so,
so I'm
so
gonna
this was
forward you the
specifically
data.
about the facilities and ground use one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I'm gonna share the data with the two of you, like I said, it was,
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
And we so appreciate you putting it together. Just so everybody knows what we're talking about, so the facilities and grounds policy,
Sure, Frank's on.
KF.1, is a policy that like talks about the building usage and the fees for people to utilize the facility. So if someone wants to use the high school auditorium, somebody wants to use Quintessence gym, et cetera, et cetera. And in 2019, they revised it, like winter of 2019, and then, of course, spring of 2020, everybody went home, and there were no events and no usage of buildings. And so fast forward, this fall, community groups started asking questions about the policy because they were noticing differentials in their bills, and it was causing hardships for, especially nonprofits, et cetera. And so that's how the policy came back to the policy subcommittee. And so, understanding a little bit of the background of why they had changed it in 2019, we wanted to get data from the facilities folks about who's using the buildings, how much money the school department's bringing in, where that money's going out, is that the amount that we need to cover the wear and tear of external groups, et cetera. And so that's why we're so grateful to have the information pulled, because we wanted to make a really educated decision, because we wanna make sure to be protecting the assets, but not like overtaxing the community that wanna use the schools that are in the town. So that's why we got here.
And then at the same time, in March of 2023, we were informed by ABM,
That they're gonna start
no more
charging.
coverage without
Yeah.
being paid for it, so.
Yeah, and so
That-
that added
and
an
that made the
additional
big
cost, exactly.
Conversation out.
Yeah, so, yeah, I guess just one question that I have, for that one, do you mind, Jen? And we'll look at all the data and stuff, but as far as from a practical sense, like with different folks using the buildings and different things, like that all, like, do you see anything from the person that oversees the area that, has to keep up the buildings, that like you would have concern about? Like, do you think we have the infrastructure to fix the auditorium appropriately, or do you think having community groups in, like, causes a lot of issues? Like, if the choir's in there, like, are you seeing that impact on the building?
So it's wear and tear, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the reasons, you guys all know I'm fairly new here, I think one of the reasons it started was the stadium. Because in 10 to 12 years, you're gonna need $1.5 million to replace that field. And I think that's what started the drive of all of this, was that, where does that money come from in 10 to 15 years? If you don't start building up the coffers now and have it when you get there, where do you get it? And so I know that's where that started, and then the rest, I wasn't here for the
Yeah.
policies, but
Do you
it
see
makes
any-
sense, and I've worked in other districts,
Yeah.
as you know. One is Warwick, and they have a big, huge facilities use policy. When I was in Situate, it was mandated that, and I think it's the same all, you can't be the custodian on staff and manage an event, which that's what we do here, and they did it in Situate, but in Warwick, you have to have a separate person for an event. So there are a lot of different types of policies out there, and I keep looking at it because we work together in Warwick, and I know that policy pretty well. But we've made it so that we're not, if you're coming in as a student or a student with two parents to do a senior project, no, you don't need a custodian. But if you're bringing the general public into the building, because on Monday morning when Barbara shows up, or the principal shows up to a building expecting to stop their day, and it's a hot mess, and that day custodian on Monday is now trying to pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Because rec was in a building and we didn't have a custodian there. And so I think that's what started this whole thing with custodial. Dennis, over the last couple of years, was just putting bodies there and they would have charged us. And now his corporate office said, oh no, we're losing money, and so that's what's
I don't think
snowballing.
anyone has an issue with the custodian, like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, because
Yeah.
I've heard a couple of things about
Oh, no,
some of
yeah.
the groups upset about paying and how much
Oh,
money
no,
they're paying.
no, they definitely are upset about paying it, but I think, you know, as far as the policy goes, that makes sense to me, right? Like,
Right.
we never want the custodial staff to come in on Monday and have all the food wrappers and different things from the
A
rec
dancing
basketball,
floor,
yeah,
right.
like my kid and his little rec basketball friends leave water bottles
Classes go in
everywhere.
and start, they go in for the classes and they're starting a PE class.
Yeah.
Or they're on the stage for something and
Yeah.
there's equipment left,
Yeah.
there's.
So that part makes sense, I think the biggest question is about the rates, right, Jen, and where that, and how that money's then being reinvested into the building, so we'll look more into that and look at the
And so
data.
I believe I sent the stuff to Frank, Elle, and Jules, so Elle could add her portion to it, and that's, where's the money going?
Perfect.
Right, because I don't know that side of it. In the folder I shared with you, there is some information from Jeannie about what account number it goes to,
Mhm.
but after that, we don't know.
Great, thank you so much,
No problem.
we'll have to invite you back.
Thanks.
And maybe else, if it's like that combination.
Yeah, I'll take a look
Yeah.
at it and then.
And if anything gets in depth, I can have Jeannie come too, because she's very proficient at the facilities use side of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's her
Yeah,
main
she does
focus
a
during
lot.
the day.
Alright, perfect.
Thank you.
Yep.
So if students use the facility for a senior project, do they have to pay anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just
It's
wanted-
external, so like, for example, like when the community choir comes in, or when the, like the town, the rec services comes in to
Right.
use the gym and things like that.
A large group of general public is
Okay,
more
just
what
'cause
I
know
worry
a lot
about.
of- A lot of
Yeah,
students.
no,
use it for
we
senior
had that
project.
conversation, because
That
some
would be
people
difficult.
questioned it with me. Nope, and then parents can come in and things like that, it's just, it's that lot, those large groups. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
guys.
and thanks for all that
Thank you.
data.
My computer's about to die, so do you mind taking that?
Hmm?
Oh, but I can't access mine. Do you mind taking the lead on this one? So,
Yeah.
the professional conduct with student and how it may or may not intersect with the dress code.
Yes. Is there not a plug right underneath you, on the floor?
It is, but it has to plug into the outlet and the cord doesn't reach.
It's Velcroed underneath your leg, just pull it. See the cord? See how it's Velcroed up?
This one?
Yeah, pull that off.
Yeah, but that doesn't, it won't plug into the wall, it's not long enough.
It's the floor, it's in the floor.
It's on the floor? Oh, okay, I gotcha, bingo.
I was very jealous that they had them on the floor, because I forgot to do that in my building, and it makes me sad every time. You can't do it after you pour the concrete, it's over. Okay, so while Jen's getting situated, I'll lead on this one, and so again, this is policy GBEBB, and it's professional conduct with student policy. And if you have your computers, it's online, or if it got sent to you, it's on the thing, and again, it's policy, it's in the G section. And so, this one was written in June of 2022, so it's a fairly recent one. And so, again, the policy subcommittee, wanted to take a look at it to see, how this policy was interacting with maybe handbook level policies, particularly high school or middle school. And then, to get some feedback on perhaps edits or changes that might need to be made here, or things that this policy might have unintentionally done, like on the other side, right? Because.
Keep talking, let's see if I
I
can.
don't know, okay. There's one, you need a what?
I can find a seat that I can plug into.
Oh, what about that, there? Alright, and so we wanted to invite, particularly Dr. Morris, the students, et cetera, for their thoughts on this policy, as we've been asked to look at it, to potentially revise. So anyone will take feedback from anybody?
A lot of degrees figuring this thing out.
Listen, Dr. Earl will jump in as needed. I'm excited.
I think mostly for the policy, it was that one line, I think it's number 9, under the last section.
I'm listening, Barbara.
It says, commenting, under professional conduct with students, that commenting on a student's physical appearance or body in any manner that could have the effect of objectifying the student and or compromising the student's social and emotional well-being. It's hard to address anything they're wearing without making them commenting on their physical appearance, because that's the very nature of a dress code, is what you're wearing and your physical appearance. And especially, I've never met a student that's been, not had a little bit of hurt feelings or, emotional reaction to being spoken to about such a thing.
Yep, so that social and emotional well-being piece.
It's very difficult, even when we say, this is our objective in having a dress code. We like the students we want them to be comfortable, but this is a workplace. It's an adult workplace, it's a student workplace. So how do we instill in our students the knowledge of what's appropriate dress for different environments? An outfit may be really adorable for the nightclub or whatever activity, or the beach, but not necessarily in this environment. And one of the things that has come back to us as feedback from employers and community members is when we don't try to instill certain expectations of dress, kids show up at job interviews in workplaces or internships, and they're not dressed as that though the community would expect. And there's like, why aren't you teaching these students? And it's like, well, we try, but there are also young people who are experimenting with who they are in life, and I'll let them say more about that. But this particular language, especially in the last few years, has made a lot of faculty members squeamish about having any kind of conversation along these lines with students. So we're in a place right now where the only dress code we're enforcing is the one that has to do with safety, because we cannot see your face with a visor or hood that's making you not visible on campus. So,
thank you for that context. I really appreciate it. Others' thoughts on particularly that line is on page 3, item number 9. And so again, this was written in June of 2022, so it's only been in place for this school year. And it's basically that commenting on a student's physical appearance or body in any manner that can have an effect of objectifying the student and or compromising the student's social and emotional well-being.
I was reading earlier that line, and that was also one of the things that stuck out to me as maybe, I don't want to say could be revised, but I guess could be revised, yes. My concern about it wasn't relating necessarily directly to the dress code, but when I read it, I felt that it would be more, that line, number 9, would be more accurate if it specified that the comments were about a student's appearance or body were specifically about their body and not about their clothes. You know what I mean? Like commenting on a student's physical appearance or body in a manner that objectifies their body, not objectifies the student. Does that make any sense at all, what I'm trying to say? Because
differentiating clothes from
right.
physical.
Comments
appearance,
about,
yeah.
Like, this is gonna be terrible, but if somebody said something.
You're on
like,
tape, Barbara, don't forget.
I know. Some of the things the students are concerned about or have voiced feelings about is comments that imply you're too large to be wearing that. Like if you were thinner, you'd look cute in that outfit, but you're too large. Like that's just hurtful, and that's inappropriate. It's not about how you look in the clothes. It's about the presentation, the professionalism that we're trying to get at. It's not about the fit.
What kind of proactive, or is there any, of like what the standards of dress is expectation-wise at the school at this point? Like, is there anything that I really appreciated what you said about teaching students about like professionalism and about when they go out into the world and different things like that. Like, is that part of curriculum? Is that part of orientation? Like, kind of, how do we set that standard? Because I think what my definition would be and what I would think is fine for my kids might be very different for somebody else, or what my definition might be very different from what my kid then puts on after they leave my house, which could be a different story.
We do see a lot of bathroom switches in the morning.
I bet.
So, the things that typically were in the dress code before were all students must wear a top where it has a front, a back, and sides.
It's still in, right? It's just not being
It's in, but
implemented?
we're, yeah.
Not being enforced,
We're
for
not,
lack of a better
we're
word?
not enforcing
Okay.
it, yeah. So, and that applies to either gender. The things we tried to put in there were expressing genderless dress. So we took out things about spaghetti straps. That used to be, that was an old version of the thing, you can't wear spaghetti straps. Well, you know what? I have some adult teachers who come in, they have, you know, thin straps, and this, when it's getting summertime, with a light shirt or jacket over it kind of thing. You know, we don't expect students to dress like teachers, to the professional level of teachers. So, and things that used to say, you know, like low cut. Well, that's obviously aimed at young women. So, and what is that aimed at? If you're saying it has to have a full front or back and the sides, that pretty much says what we're aiming at for all students. It's very hard to word the language so that it's not aiming at judgmental aspects of students as far as body type or gender or styles, you know, popularity. You know, the whole crop top thing, most schools now say the bottom of your shirt has to meet the top of your pants or skirts, or, you know, whatever you're wearing, if it's a two-piece kind of thing. That should apply to everybody, not just one gender. And I know it's more popular with one gender than it is the other gender, but it applies to everybody equally.
I thought most schools were abolishing dress codes because they're hard to enforce and are punitive, really, because they discriminate mostly.
Yeah.
And really, you shouldn't be commenting on a student's appearance anyways.
No, and that's the fine line we walk, is because you want some level of professionalism and some level of hygienics.
Right, the question that was asked was, are we doing anything in the curriculum or the building to address the issue of professional dress versus, you know, just everyday? So that was the question that.
Yeah, I asked, is it getting only presented in a punitive way, or is it getting presented in a, like, for lack of a better word, like a proactive way? Of
Right.
like, hey, these are, as an NKHS student, this is why we believe in this is what we wear, you know, instead of just, you will get in trouble if you don't do X. Like, that was my question, was like, do they understand that norm? And I get it if they don't, like, I don't remember getting that at all.
So in my experience, it's only just the dress code, unless there's like a band concert or senior project night or something, it's just wear whatever. And then if it's like band concert, wear all black, or senior project, dress formally. Other than that, there's no really directive as to why or specific punishments or what happens if you don't. It's just, here's the dress code in the handbook, which most students don't read because they don't want to read a 45-page document.
Do they not sign it?
No,
Yeah, they do.
we do.
The forms, you're supposed to, there are forms at the beginning of the year that every parent and every
Yes.
child says they sign.
Gabe, you better do it, or
And one of
we're not gonna let you graduate.
One of
I don't
those
have
forms says, I've read the
recollection of
student
this,
handbook and I
that's-
understand the
It's
policy.
an electronic
Yeah.
click on your thing.
That would be why, because it's as, okay,
Yeah,
because I was
no
thinking
worries.
this is paper, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I know you definitely did, Gabe, don't worry.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say that I really agree that having a more like proactive approach to like the dress code or what, I didn't even, I thought we didn't have a dress code anymore because it's not talked about anymore because of this policy. And I think that having a more proactive approach could be really helpful, but it's really limited because of that bullet point on the policy. And so I think that if we revise it, we might be more able to have healthy conversations with students about, you know, clothing and dress. So that's all.
What would that look like to you?
Well, I know we have assemblies in the beginning of the year with, like all the grades. And I think it could be helpful just to have a few slides on the presentation talking about, you know, not what you can't do, but what you can do and, you know, how and why. You know, why we want to maintain professional dress. And, you know, I know we do talk about it a little, but maybe expanding on that in those presentations at the beginning of the year.
Ms. Lee. Mr. Mezzanotte and I, having been high school principals, I can tell you, and I'm sure he would agree, and Dr. Pilata too, based on his experience, that we're approaching that time of year where there's going to be more of a focus on the way that individuals are dressed, because the weather is warmer, and you know, these are teenagers who want to, you know, like, express themselves in some way. It is really difficult. And I guess the best way for, you know, during my tenure as a principal to address those things is, like, I guess the challenge is, like, how do you address things that, a dress code or the way that a student is dressed that may be a distraction in some way? That is, I think, the hard part, right? Because there are, especially now with the weather getting warmer, you know, people, are, for lack of a better term, are gonna be wearing less than they normally would in the fall and the winter.
I hope not in this building. Pretty well.
So, I've been away from it for a while. You mean that already exists? Is that what
Oh,
you're
yeah.
suggesting?
Yeah,
So
that's
it
what
just
I
is,
said.
I'll tell you what, and as men, it's very, I'm not gonna challenge the way that a female is dressed. I'm not doing that.
So I can piggyback on that a little bit, because I have recent experience with this, coming from where I was. And I'm just gonna speak to that example. So like, I had a student in Lincoln where I was, bring forward issues with our dress code, which was written in the handbook, and quite honestly, she was right. It was pretty outdated, and so what we decided to do is we looked at it and we said, all right, let's first of all get students in on the process of developing, of revising this, and that was really important, because we said, let's get like an equal number of students and adults, so we can have a conversation where there's balance about it. And then we talked as a group about two basic things. One was the language that goes into the handbook. And to Barbara's point, genderless was like a non-negotiable. It's not gonna be, it's gonna be language that is neutral, okay, according to gender, number one. And then number two, the second thing we talked about was that was the first meeting. We talked about language, what belongs in there, what doesn't belong in there. And within that conversation, we talked about, again, the point about, you know, what school is. The environment in school versus environment and elsewhere, and how we present ourselves differently depending on our environment sometimes. The second part of the piece was how it gets enforced, because that is key, that we don't ever want to, and it can happen, call attention to a student's dress in a way that is humiliating, embarrassing, that kind of thing, because that was a thing that we wanted to make sure didn't happen either. And so we tried to come up with some language that would say, if a student is thought to be or is considered to be in violation, there's gonna be a specific process followed by which it gets reported, so that it's done in a way where the student is not, you know what I mean? So that's just my experience, and that happened this year. That happened this year at Lincoln High School when I was there.
Can you read the dress code from Lincoln, or share it with everyone, just?
Sure.
It's probably on the website.
It's not now, because it hasn't, because it's new language is gonna go into effect when the new handbook gets approved over the summer. So it's going into effect next year. It's not actually in effect now.
I
If you
think,
could share that, that would be great.
I think involving students in the process is huge.
Yeah. Because here's my concern. With the complaint that we received from the parent, she shared that she ran into a teacher from this district who was buying a shirt for a student because she felt that student was showing an unacceptable amount of cleavage. That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And we can't have that.
No.
So, we need to find a happy medium.
And I totally understand the intent of this number 9, because we've had the dress code conversation, seems like annually, and I think we're inching closer and closer to what we would consider a good policy. We're struggling still with the enforcement piece of it. But students had reported alleged comments that were made to them, which I would consider inappropriate for
Why do
any
you call
adult to
them
say
alleged?
to a student. And I think that's what this line was trying to address, but just was written in such a way that we cannot say anything. And never mind not saying anything appropriate, we just can't say anything. So, for fear of, nobody wants to be in violation of the school committee policy.
Well, and I think, and I wasn't on the school committee when they wrote this part, but I believe that the intent of it is to protect the students and protect the staff, right? Like, because you have, and so, but I also think that it's very important if you have documentation in a handbook or something like that, that it if it, and I know it changed, like this changed in June, and then I don't know when your handbook gets approved, or if it gets approved.
Over the summer.
Yeah, and so, like, in theory, but also, like, this is the first cycle that we've had, right? So in theory, like, if when the new handbook is getting looked at, it is very, I think, detrimental to have something in there that's not being enforced, because then it makes students think that lots of other things in there might not be enforced, you know, so I think that's something to consider, that if this policy doesn't change, like, perhaps thinking about, okay, like, what is gonna stay in, because you don't want something in there that then, like, because of this policy, teachers are enforcing, then the students are like, okay, well then it's lawless here, right? And so that, finding that balance. I also think, I love what you said about, like, involving students in the conversation, but I also think, like, thinking about, like, the intent of why, and I think as a society, we've come really far as, like, one, like, why it matters about why students dress, like, I think that has evolved eons, even from when I was in school, and then also, like, what does really matter, like, so to me, the dress code policy about the safety stuff and about the cameras and things like that is so important, and so I think just kind of differentiating, like, why things are in, and really, I think having the district have a really soul search about, like, okay, why does it matter if their shirts touch their pants? And I don't know what, like, my stance on that, but, like, why is that sentence in there? Like, why are belly buttons bad, right? Like, are they bad in 2023 still? Like, I know why people in 1950s probably thought they were bad, or this, no, but I'm not joking, like, I think each line has to kind of be examined.
We had
Okay,
this-
why is this important?
Right.
Is this prohibiting that student from learning? Is it prohibiting groups of students from learning? Do we really care? Like, right, and trying to figure out, like, what do we really care about? And for me, like, the safety stuff really does matter. Like, yeah, my kid likes hats, but, like, you're not wearing a hat in class, at school, because that matters because of safety. Okay, that still makes sense in 2023. So I think whatever we decide to do, like, thinking it through of why do we think this is bad is important, because some of the stuff is just old, like, things that maybe we've evolved on, and some things might really still matter. Like, if you're wearing a really blousy shirt that's, like, prohibiting you from doing PE or prohibiting you from actually participating in learning, I can't think of really funky glasses that make it so you can't read, yeah, that matters for the academic mission of what we're trying to do here. So I know it's hard, but I think just thinking through that will really matter.
We actually had conversations about those very things, like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want, I mean, like, what about the educational environment do you not want the midriff shown for? And we were thinking, well, in chemistry, you're working with chemicals, you don't want
Probably a lot
exposed
of
skin
it, so.
at that level. Cooking, you're working with a hot stove, not a good idea. So what we
That's valid.
eventually evolved to was, it's when there's a special environment, it's up to the teachers, the teacher can ask students to wear, put a shirt over, so that your skin is not exposed to chemicals or
Yeah, I remember in shop
burners
having to put something on,
and
so I
those
didn't
kinds of things,
cut
so.
my arm.
But
Yeah,
we-
so that's why I think, like, so I think, again, going back to that, like, that makes sense, right? In chemistry, you'd want lots of skin covered, not just your belly, but, like, so I think that's part of the process, is thinking that through. Because I would be concerned of changing this policy on the other side, because I think it's important to protect teachers and protect students on the worst case scenario of people commenting on, oh, you'd look better, like the example you gave earlier of, oh, like, if you lost 10 pounds, you'd look better in that outfit, or, other derogatory things, or, oh, don't you look pretty today, in not like a nice way, right? And I think it helps protect, it helps protect the staff, because the context matters and how things say, but if it's just a student and a staff member, like, I think it's better to say nothing, and that's hard. I've had to change my practices as a teacher, like, I don't comment on students' clothes anymore, even if in my head I think, oh, those are cute boots, I don't say out loud, those are cute boots anymore, like, that's just, I say, how was your weekend instead, so I think some of it's just thinking through that.
I right now, my struggle is that my faculty is in a hard place, because when we put something in a handbook, the teachers feel it's their obligation to enforce it. But when it's in a school committee policy that makes language that makes it almost impossible for you to enforce what's in the handbook, there's no right choice for them. So we kind of let them off the hook at the beginning of the year in a faculty meeting and said, look, this policy was done at the end of June, well, people were away on vacation, now we're back. So I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna ask you to put yourself out there and risk violating a school committee policy. So we're gonna go by the school committee policy right now, and the only thing we're gonna enforce is hats, hoods, safety issues, like safety with the exposed skin in particular areas, and hats and hoods.
Are you not,
And that's all we're doing right now.
so no obscene graphics if somebody came in with a shirt
Oh,
that?
yes, I should say that,
Alright.
yes.
Yeah, I
So
guess
anything
that, yeah.
beer advertisement, THC ads, marijuana leaves, yeah, no, those are not allowed.
Mhm.
Anything that's hate speech would
So
not be
still
allowed.
under atmosphere, that one's
Right.
still valid and physical
Right.
safety is still valid.
Right.
But but where's the other, what part isn't getting enforced then?
So this year, in the absence of a more strict dress code, have there been any issues with it being a distraction or someone wearing something not formal enough, or has having this amount of a dress code covered it?
I would say, there's been a few instances where I would think that the clothing, let me just say, would be unhygienic. Let me just put it.
Can you describe what unhygienic is?
And we're trying to find a
Yeah.
solution, like this is not.
Right, no, I
yeah.
know.
I'm genuinely
No, no,
curious,
no, I
I don't
know.
understand what she means by that.
If you're wearing skirts that are not, or shorts, or even some of the boys wear special
Oh,
pattern
paracords are
shorts.
touching chairs.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that
like
kind of thing.
unhygienic, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
The sagging pants are back from the 90s.
Yeah, your butt's touching a chair and then
Yeah.
somebody else comes in and sits in that chair, that's
right,
gross.
yeah.
I'll call that unhygienic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too, yeah.
That
Got you.
kind of thing, so. It's hard to describe without being too graphic,
I work
but
at a
thank you
school,
for
I
putting it that
understand.
way, yes.
Yeah, so it's really just that, under that basic principle part that's not being covered. So it's a sentence that says, students must wear shirts that fully cover the front, backs, and side, under the arms, in pants and jeans, or the equivalent, dress, shorts, skirts, and footwear, undergarments excluding straps and waistbands may not be visible. So it seems like out of the entire dress code policy, it's those three sentences.
Mhm.
Physical safety seems like it's still being enforced, which is, I agree with. And atmosphere is still being enforced.
Yeah.
So it's just that three sentence part that we're struggling with
Mhm.
in the
Excuse me, go ahead.
To me, those three sentences do cover the issues of the hygiene stuff. I think it's just student disobedience to it, because I think if anyone read that, they would know, okay, I can't be sagging my pants, or I can't be not wearing a shirt, or whatever it is that some hygienic issue that they might be creating. I think that if someone were to read that, they would understand, but I think it's just teenagers being teenagers, which at that point, you just have to tell them, please don't wear that, or and that's the other thing we need to come up with. What is the acceptable way to tell them without being inappropriate?
And you don't wanna call them out in front of their friends or their, that's not appropriate.
So if it's, just so I understand, if a student came in and they had a shirt on that is like a hard no, right? Like it's a very, very discriminatory, like a really bad word or something like that, right? And they walk into your class and you're like, ooh, okay, that is bad. What would be the process? Like I'm looking under the enforcement piece in the dress code about where it says, school staff is expected to equitably and consistently enforce the dress code in keeping with the modeling of respect. Violations of the dress code will be handled in a discreet manner that does not shame the student, and then it very clearly talks about like what they should not do. And then it says that they should refer the student to the student service office to discuss the violation in private. And so would you just say like, oh, William, you need to go see the vice principal and not explain why? Like, how does that actually play out if you're trying to not like shame them in front of their peers, et cetera,
Well,
about
I
it?
think Susan as a teacher can weigh in on that too, and how most faculty handle it,
Yeah.
but normally, when I was a teacher, and we had dress code issues, we'd step outside of the classroom
Mhm.
and say to the student in the hall, I think you might be in violation of the dress code. I'd like you to go down to the student service offices and have them discuss this with you. So,
I don't mean to, but that, I think one of the issues with the dress code last year, I know there was definitely like a movement within the student
Mhm.
body. was with the implementation of the dress code and the way the students were being called out about it. Like, I know, like, there was a time last year where I was like walking on the stairwell and my shirt rode up and an administrator called to me from like across the hallway, like 30 feet away, to tell me to pull it down.
Fix your shirt.
I don't know, like, because of dress code, and now I didn't feel objectified, I wasn't in emotional distress because of that, but I don't know that actually the way it was enforced was always with being pulled out into the hall or in private. There were definitely a lot of times that I witnessed or happened to me or one of my friends where, you know, it was just like a sort of shout in the hallway kind of thing. Not usually from a teacher, but from some specific administrators.
So the way that we, again, this is just my experience, the way that we went about this, and again, I want to preface this by saying that this is never perfect, it never will be perfect, it never will be something that we just fix, it just never will,
We'll be
okay?
talking about this again.
It's gonna be a topic
It's like class rank
forever,
work,
and it
we'll
will
just keep
always be
having
that
that.
way, no matter what you do, it's always gonna be that way. What we said, and this is again just from what we talked about, we said, first of all, we said the only people who are going to enforce dress code are gonna be administration. That was number one. That enforcement will happen privately, okay? It will not happen in front of other kids, it's not gonna happen in front of everybody in the cafeteria, it's gonna happen in a private space. That was the first thing we said. From a teacher's standpoint, what we said was this. We said, if you wanna report a student for a dress code violation, you're gonna submit a disciplinary referral through our system. That's how we did it, okay? It then went to the assistant principal, and what I told the assistant principals to do is I said, listen, you're gonna have variances in terms of certain teachers interpreting dress code differently, and that's always gonna happen. What I told them though is I said, what we wanna look for is just trends, okay? We're not gonna enforce every single referral, okay? We're not gonna do that, because first of all, we're not gonna keep up, and it's gonna be subject to different interpretations. What we wanna look for is just trends. So for example, if one student is referred by 5 different teachers one day, chances are probably there's a problem with what the kid is wearing that day. And administratively, you're gonna wanna address it. Or if you have one kid who's enforced consistently, repeatedly, by different teachers over the course of time, again, you probably wanna have a conversation with that student. So there's judgment involved, right? And I think just speaking as a former building principal, I think that part of the job is exercising some judgment, okay? As long as the process is handled in a way that's respectful and not embarrassing to a student, you know? Is it perfect? No, it never will be, okay? But I think that was how we did it, because we felt that, and this is no disrespect to teachers whatsoever, but in the handling of what teachers do in a classroom in front of, 25, 30 kids, we just felt that it was something that really wasn't a good position to put them in terms of enforcing it. That was how we did it. That was how we dealt with it.
And at some point, it becomes a distraction to learning. I mean, do you want the teacher addressing what somebody's wearing, or do you want them to address the content that they're supposed to be covering?
So in that case, what would you do as a teacher if there was an immediate issue with the dress code, such as someone having hate speech on their shirt or whatever it was? What would you do that?
Thankfully, we never had to deal with that.
Okay.
However, if we ever did, which I would hope we wouldn't, okay, but if we ever did, that would be a more immediate issue, for sure. Different, again, judgment, right? There's exercising of judgment here. If you have wearing clothing with literally hateful content on it, that's going to be a more immediate thing, and that is also going to be an administrative matter.
Responsibility.
Yeah.
Paul, is there anything you want to chime in on before we?
Yes, Andrew.
We're gonna wrap this up.
I have one thing before we wrap it up, not related to dress code though, so,
Okay,
but related to this policy.
okay,
So.
you go first, and then in
Okay.
case he wants to chime in on that too.
When this policy was first communicated to the teachers, a lot of us noticed item 7, which says, providing drugs or alcohol to students, we're fine with that, or consuming drugs or alcohol in the presence of students. So a lot of us kind of said, I go to Woodford on the Water, or I go to whatever local restaurant I like to go to, students work there.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Can I have a beer at my table if the hostess is in my third period counseling class?
According to this, you can't.
Wait, no, but what does it say above it?
So it just says period.
So that
No,
was,
like,
that was
It's
concerning
a
to us.
bullet, right? So I was looking up to see if it says like on school grounds or at school activities or whatever.
On and off school grounds.
Yeah, so
We
that
can
was,
clarify
that was
that.
something that
I
we
think
saw.
the
and we were
intent
kinda
would
like,
be, my
yeah.
imagination would lead me to believe that that intent is, I take a group of students to Italy for a
Sure,
trip.
yeah.
And I'm at a restaurant with them and I get a glass of wine vibe. Like, I don't think it meant what you're saying, but I think that's a really good point.
And I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
When I read it, I didn't think that at first, and then several.
Or like you take kids to a Red Sox game, like you shouldn't be getting a beer,
Right,
or.
but if you're
But
out
does the
there
language-
on the water and, yeah,
Does it put us in a difficult situation?
yeah.
Yeah.
Chloe's hostessing.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, you gotta go sneak in the back. No, you're right, no, that's a great point, yeah.
So that was, that was
Mhm.
other than the, obviously,
Yeah.
the dress code conversation, but that was the one thing that jumped out at me when I read it.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Andrew, would you like to chime in?
Sure. So I will
Remember,
tell you.
Andrew's legally speaking.
Yeah,
It
I'm not a
was-
fan of
It was good,
dress
Andrew,
codes.
for the legally speaking
I'm not a fan of
part.
dress codes at all. I've never liked them, I like them even less now. And I understand everyone's perspective, and I do totally get it, I just think they are, it will never be perfect, but they're borderline unenforceable. And they're borderline inequitable just by human nature. What one person finds offensive, another person does. I guarantee you, and this is what I do with my clients all the time, if you see something that's offensive and everyone agrees that it's not offensive, but let's say physically revealing, whatever you want to say, I guarantee you I will find you another building full of teachers who have no problem with it.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to legislate fairly, and I think that the byproduct of it is it picks on certain students, and it brings people's judgment into it, and I genuinely, from a legal perspective, I do not like them.
What do you think about, Andrew, with the safety stuff? So like-
Safety stuff's different, Eric.
Yeah.
Safety stuff, I agree, and I mean, I still, shop, you have to wear work boots, no open-toed things in the woods, that to me is crystal clear.
Like hats?
Safety, hats, scarf over your face, I think that's justifiable, and I'm fine with that. And
What
the
about
offensive
her?
language,
Yeah.
I'm good, I'm talking about the midriff, the spaghetti straps, so I just think that, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen, even
Do you
if it's
know-
completely well-intended. And the most interesting question I heard was yours, which was, okay, we didn't enforce it this year, what happened? And what I heard was, there was a couple situations which we wish hadn't occurred, and maybe they were unhygienic, I'm not belittling that at all. But at the end of the day, school went on, and everyone was okay, and I'm not belittling the position. I just did a presentation on this for Warwick, and the administrators kept me after for like half an hour, and I'm not getting any Christmas cards. They were not happy. But I mean that sincerely. I don't see how it can be administered fairly, even if the intent to do it fair. Just people's judgments are different. Kids' situations are different. It just I don't like them. I really don't. And the trend, it depends on where you are in the country. The trend, especially here, is really schools getting away from them completely.
But couldn't you say that about almost any rule?
No.
I suppose, but if you're.
There's always gonna be interpretation.
Well, interpretation,
Yeah.
sure, but if you've got a knife and I've got a knife, you've got a knife. But if I'm wearing a half shirt and you're wearing a half shirt, what Jen thinks is inappropriate with that half shirt versus what
Okay,
Eric thinks is
disrespectful
completely
behavior.
different.
Is there a wiggle room with disrespectful behavior? Can't that be interpreted
Yeah,
differently?
sure,
That's what I'm saying.
sure.
So I agree, I understand where
Lots
you're
of
coming
lawsuits
from.
about that too.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but the reality is, I think people who work in the schools can attest to this, the fact is that there's always going to be an understanding of there being judgmental decisions made based on this.
1000%.
Regardless if it's dress code or other things. And so whether we wanna have a dress code, none of it, that's ultimately like what we do. I'm saying, I hear what you're saying. As someone who's worked in a school though, I can tell you that not having anything as a dress code, that has consequences to it.
And I'm sure it does, honestly. That's why I was really interested in Gabe, right? In what his question was.
Yeah.
Because if it was like, hey, total chaos and anarchy, then okay, maybe I have to rethink my thinking, but it doesn't sound like that's the case, and disrespectful is actually a great counterexample, right? Because we get that all the time. Andrew Ennius has 15 disciplinary referrals for students, and Dr. Pilata has 0, and maybe the same kids are saying the same things to both of us, he's more tolerant, I'm less tolerant, that's part of the job, right? Judgment, judgment, judgment. But I will tell you that where we are as a society today, the dress stuff is much more igniting than the disrespectful comment. I mean, that's just the reality we live in, right? I get it totally, but it's like a third rail to me.
But I wonder if we just limited the number of people who have their eyes on it and handle them, if those were reduced to 5 administrators.
Yeah, I'd love
That's
to
what I'm
see
saying.
what you guys did later,
Yeah.
because to tell you the
That's
truth,
what I'm saying. I'm
that
saying
sounds
the
really.
process matters,
Yes.
right? The process matters, and that's why my take on it was, I wanted to remove teachers from having to like.
That's a great
be-
idea.
Because I just think that that's not fair to ask
You limit the discretion.
teachers in the role that they're in to be doing that, you know what I mean? And again, it's
But
still not gonna
also-
be perfect.
You also, like,
Still not gonna be perfect.
disproportionately, like, if you were just in chemistry class and then you're getting pulled down to the office to talk about it, like, your student knows that you were the one that referred them, and so that's where you've gotta like figure
Well,
out.
again, I think that's where you have a
Yeah.
conversation with
Yeah, I like
administrators
what-
about how it's done, and
Well, and I also
so.
liked what you said about themes and about like, you know, looking for like, oh, did 5 teachers like put this in today? Or has the student gotten many? Like, I thought that was a really interesting point too.
Trends, you know
Where
what I
it's
mean?
not just one day I wore this one outfit and now it's this big thing, but like, hey, like this is like whatever. So that I could like, that
And
I
I think
appreciate.
administrators do that more now anyway, because I think that administration now, like, you have to apply some, look at the whole picture of that, as opposed to just like, you know, that's the job,
We
you
don't
know?
get Christmas cards either.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I get it, and I don't wanna be
Andrew's had to go
disrespectful of
out.
anyone, I just
Yeah.
know, and ultimately, what are you going to do? Right, so someone comes in with a low-cut shirt, and you follow that process, and hey, please don't wear this again. You know, 3
Well,
teachers complain,
and
they
the
don't think so,
current one
and
says
the
put
kid
something
wears it
on.
again the second day. What are you ultimately gonna do, tell them they can't come to school, give them an in-house suspension? And when the parent comes in and says, well, who's complaining? Well, the teachers. Well, how did that disrupt the education environment? Did any of the kids complain? Was anyone hurt? And I get it, I'm not, it's just,
And what I would also
I
say,
get very
again,
nervous with them.
this is operational again, but what I would also say to the assistant principals in making judgment decisions, is if you're like in between, err on the side of the student. If you're in between, stay on the side of the student, you know what I mean? So if it's something that's like not blatantly obvious, that's like really like, you know, noticeably, then you know, give the student the benefit of the doubt, okay? That's,
Yeah, and by
I'm sorry,
having.
this is great discussion, I hate to cut it off, but we are supposed to be at the town hall in 10 minutes, so I gotta get this.
Sorry.
So, no, thank you, everybody, I just need to.
Take way
No,
longer.
so like, for
It would
next
end up in the
steps,
same place, right?
Yeah,
I
it would be
get
good.
it.
It would
No,
end
no,
up-
I
You're
didn't,
gonna be
I
doing it
really
again
do,
next
and I
year.
really
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
everybody's time.
Yeah.
So, for the policy people, is May 1st at 4:30 good?
It's my mom's 90th birthday.
ooh.
Your wedding anniversary and now your mother's birthday.
Yeah, you
What are
gotta
gonna
avoid
come up with
these, you
next
gotta
time, Bob?
avoid these days.
Did you wanna postpone the foreign exchange conversation till next time?
Yeah, we have to, sorry.
Jen, I could be here, but just for a little, I got something
Is that
more at
6:30 or
5:30, but I can certainly come for like 45 minutes or so.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
that would
okay.
be great. Erin, does that work for you?
Yeah, so-
No, that is.
it's 6:30,
Yeah,
maybe
I
exec
know.
session.
Okay, I will send out a doodle poll and we can pick a date. Does that work? Yes, everybody? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn? Second?
Frankie.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right, thank you,
so much.
everybody. Thank you. Let me show that.
Thank you, Dave, thank you, Chloe.
Yes, thank you, thank you.